Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our fourth online ESINERGY interview. My name is Katja Karba, and I represent the local energy agency Pomurje from Slovenia, the lead partner of the ESINERGY project. ESINERGY is a transnational cooperation project that is co-financed by the Interreg Danube region program and is focusing on improving the uptake of renewable energy systems, reducing peak loads, and supporting a more correct and practical implementation of the EU Renewable Energy Directive across the Danube region. One of our key output is the transnational master plan, a shared collection of measures and recommendations that can help policymakers at different governance levels. The purpose of this interview is to make the general public more aware of the specific features of decentralized renewable energy systems, the barriers small actors face, and why a transnational strategy is useful. Today, I'm very happy to welcome Dr. Michael Stöhr from Baum Consult from Munich, from Germany, who has long been working on renewable energy policy and the role of small decentralized market players. Michael's focus matters because the transition to renewable energy often assumes large-scale centralized generation, but in reality many opportunities lie at local scale, like small hydro plants, PV, community grids, prosumers, electrical vehicle fleets, storage. Without regulatory change and supportive frameworks, these local opportunities remain underused. His work shows how to unlock that potential through a mix of technical solutions, pilot experiments, flexible energy models, and regulatory proposals. In this context of ESINERGY, in the context of ESINERGY, this means that local or regional actors like municipalities, small utilities, communities, not only large energy companies, can become active players in deployment of renewables. So, Michael will share some key messages, focusing especially on the centralized supply models, regulatory gaps, and the opportunities we discovered during ESINERGY. At the end of the interview, you are kindly invited to post your questions in the YouTube chat, and we will try to address as many as possible. So, let's begin with our first question. Michael, I hope you are ready. And our first question is, to begin with, could you briefly introduce the ESINERGY project and explain what the transnational master plan is?
Good morning, Katja. Thank you very much for inviting me to this interview, and good morning to everybody listening now and watching this live presentation. To your question, you answered it yourself already widely. So ESINERGY is a project of 16 partners from 12 countries in the EU and countries who want to access the EU. And all these countries have to transpose EU directive into national law. So ESINERGY deals with one specific European Union directive, which is Directive for the Promotion of Renewable Energies, or RED. But transposing into national law is not sufficient for the implementation, and this is where ESINERGY comes in, where the master plan comes in. So the master plan is not a plan to be adopted by the European Parliament or another governance body. I would say it's a library of measures or strategies which we propose that can be implemented at different levels of governance, at local level, regional level, national level. And also we have made some proposals for changing things at EU level.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. What you said shows something important. Even though the master plan comes from many countries working together, it is not a strict or fixed document. Unfortunately, it's more like a collection of ideas because every country deals with energy in its own way. That already shows how different It is to create common solutions across the region. So let's now look at what we needed, why we needed such a plan at all. So why was there a need to develop such transnational master plan? What challenges or gaps does it aim to address, especially in terms of integrating renewables and managing peak loads across the Danube region?
Let me take 2 steps back. First, why do we need to deploy renewable energies? There are many reasons. First of all, fossil fuel combustion is the main driver of climate change, and renewable energies don't emit climate gases. So when we change the energy system towards renewable energies, this is a major measure to combat climate change. Secondly, renewable energies are the most cost-effective sources of energy in most countries right now. They are often cheaper than the running cost of fossil fuel-based energy supply. Third, renewable energies can provide economic value creation in rural areas and income to farmers, small and medium-sized enterprises, prosumer households, and many other market participants whose primary activity is not the supply of energy. Fourth, renewable energy are decentralized. They allow for energy supply at regional level, and the basic supply can be provided even when small communities, city quarters, or buildings are cut off from supra-regional networks. This has an important consequence. Renewable energies can make the energy system more resilient and prepared for natural disasters, sabotage, or military attacks. When the energy supply is more decentral and prepared for cut-off from supra-regional energy supply, such events have far less impact compared to central energy supply, as we can see in Ukraine right now. Yeah, so when a centralized energy supply system is attacked, this has huge consequences. When you do the same thing in a more decentralized way, yeah, that an attack affects only a small unit, then you need many more attacks in order to destroy the energy supply of a whole country. And at this point, the pilot action of our Ukrainian partner comes in, and it shows very clearly the benefits of decentral renewable energy supply in a wartime condition. So these are all the reasons which speak for renewable energies, and the directive for the promotion of renewable energy is for that, yeah. But second, there are specific features of renewable energies which pose some challenges. They are the cheapest technologies with an abundant potential are photovoltaics and wind power. So technologies which generate electricity, and then you have to transform it into other forms like the heat and cold and for mobility and also for chemical products. Yeah. Everything needs to be based on electricity. And secondly, PV and wind power are fluctuating, so they produce intermittently electricity. Yeah, and this means that security of supply requires a good combination of these sources and down to the local level, a good combination of PV and wind power, notably, and in addition, renewable energy sources which can continuously be used, which are not intermittent, like biogas, yeah, or geothermal heat, or hydropower, where you are less dependent on natural fluctuations. You need the sector coupling of electricity. We see it cold, chemical fuel production, and so on. You need storage, and you need demand flexibility. So shifting from a fossil fuel-based energy economy to a renewable energy economy is a huge paradigm shift. Yeah. And it requires that the energy supply needs to be rethought in a completely different way. And this is a big challenge. Yeah. So now the Renewable Energy Directive and also some parts of the EU Electricity Market Directive provide a framework for the deployment of renewable energies in EU member states and accession countries. However, this does not mean that renewable energy deployment is a self-running business once these EU directives are transposed. Yeah. There are many obstacles which become apparent when you go into practice. Yeah. And the master plan comes in here and provides some guidance how to overcome these obstacles which exist at the local or regional or national level or even at EU level itself due to a slight incoherence of provisions in different EU directives.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Michael. You explained very clearly that renewable energy has many advantages, but it also brings new challenges that our systems are not always ready for. Laws might exist, but in real life, things often don't work as smoothly as we expect. So, with that in mind, let's look at how this master plan was created. Our third question goes to how the master plan was developed. Can you walk us through the process? Who was involved and what methods were used?
Yeah, first it was developed internally amongst the ESINERGY project partners and in contact with stakeholders from outside. Yeah, and there are three elements basically which came in. First, there were 8 pilot actions implemented across the Danube regions, and the results and lessons learned from these pilot actions are a major input to the master plan. Second is our stakeholder input. So we had stakeholder engagement sessions in different countries and collected experiences from people outside. Also, we took up questions and tried to find answers. So in this dialogue, yeah, things were developed which entered into the master plan. And third, there was an analysis of the Renewable Energy Directive and other legislation and regulation which we made for ourselves. And of course, then there was a lot of exchange between the ESINERGY project partners during the general meetings and many, many bilateral meetings which we had.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you. It's good to hear that the master plan is built on real experience from the pilots and from many discussions with partners. And this is why our Danube project, Danube program is supporting this cooperation and cooperation between the project partners, different external stakeholders as well. And this shows that it was shaped, that the master plan was shaped by practical problems, not just by theory. So let's now look at the role of stakeholders, since they often spot issues that others don't. What role did stakeholder engagement play in shaping the master plan, and how did country-specific feedback and pilot projects contribute to the final strategy?
Well, let me explain it on the example of Germany, because we had so many stakeholder sessions. So the stakeholder input was helpful to sharpen the view on the challenges of the implementation of the Renewable Energy Directive. So in Germany, for instance, the stakeholder engagement session provided the base for 5 legal and regulatory proposals, out of which 4 concern the EU level. Concretely, we proposed amendments of the Electricity Market Directive. Nothing less than that. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Michael. We know that other countries also did these stakeholder engagement sessions and get a real nice feedback. And your example shows that when we talk to people who work with energy systems every day, they quickly point out gaps in the law. It's interesting that even small local projects can reveal problems at EU level. And to make this clearer, let's look at one concrete pilot example. Could you share an example of how local pilot findings were scaled into strategic recommendations at the transnational level?
Yeah, excuse me for staying with the German example, which I know best. Yeah, so in Bad Hindelang, in the Allgäu, in the southern border of Germany, 2 pilot activities were implemented that can reduce the load on the connection line between the local grid and the upstream grid. So one activity consists in controlling the power generation of a hydropower plant. The other activity on the control of the power delivered by a public electric vehicle charging station on the consumption side. In both cases, as it is necessary to make this work, that the network operator, which is a small vertically integrated undertaking in this case, uses information about the status of the electric network for modifying the generation and the supply. However, this is not allowed by European law, so specifically it's forbidden by the Electricity Market Directive. So it's allowed under complicated circumstances, but it's so complicated that it results in legal uncertainty, and the small network operator doesn't know how to do it in order to be on the safe side. Yeah. And hence, we proposed a modification of the electric market directive to resolve this. And here again, a new way of thinking is required. So EU legislation cares very much for a free market. But a free market is good, we need it, yeah, but it's not the solution for everything. And it's not the only aim of the European Union. Sustainable development is another goal. And protection of the environment, social coherence, and any others. And second, when you go down to small scales and when small market players are involved, the principle of a free market comes to a limit. An ordinary citizen does not issue a Europe-wide tender when he or she wants to buy a new household item. Yeah. To put it in a nutshell, there should be more thresholds below which things should be less regulated. In the case of the German pilots, we derived, among others, the recommendation that there should be more freedom for small, vertically integrated undertakings.
Thank you. I think this example shows that sometimes technology is ready, but the rules are not. So local actors see solutions quickly, but regulations can slow things down. And this is a key challenge in many countries, I would say. And now let's move to the actual measures you propose in the master plan. What are some of the key technical or policy measures proposed in the master plan?
Well, I would say the key challenge of renewable energy supply is that it involves new market players whose main activity is not energy supply. So they are not used to deal with energy supply. So when they want to become a prosumer, they have to familiarize with something new. Yeah. But the European Union supports that new market actors become market participants in the energy sector. And the Renewable Energy Directive and the Electricity Market Directive define new types of market players. But transposition of the Renewable Energy Directive in national law is not sufficient. Yeah? And here the master plan comes in, and the key measures proposed are those which enable new market players to assume their role. So what is needed are clear and simple processes for everything which new market actors must deal with. Something like a one-stop shop. That means a single point where new market players, households for instance, yeah, get all the required information and support. Support can be templates. Yeah? Ideally, this is implemented at a national level. This is the case in Austria, for instance. Yeah? But it can have regional branches at regional level and decentralized support centers. So.
Yes, exactly. What stands out is that many new players want to join the energy transition, but the process is often too complicated for them. If we want more people to participate, we need simpler steps. So let's connect this with lessons from the pilot actions. How do these measures reflect the lessons learned from the pilot actions, such as the bidirectional charging in Slovenia or the energy community in Hungary and Austria?
Well, these measures reflect the experience from the pilot action, which was very common in many pilot actions, that administrative and permitting processes can be a critical barrier. So, for instance, the installation of very small and simple PV battery systems in Croatia and Bosnia-Herzegovina required lengthy permission processes because the relevant authorities were not familiar with the new technologies. So they didn't know if it is regulated, how it is regulated, and whatever. The electric vehicle flexibility integration and bidirectional charging program proposed by the Slovenian partners in the project reflects the experience from the pilot actions that technical standards, operational protocols, and market participation models for bidirectional charging are lacking.
Yeah, exactly. This really shows that even small projects can face a lot of paperwork and unclear procedures. Often the problem is not the technology, but the lack of experience among the authorities. Now let's look at which measures could make the biggest difference in the future. Are there any measures you consider particularly innovative or critical for future replication?
I think the point is which measures close an important gap and can trigger a huge potential. Let me take the Slovenian proposal for an electric vehicle flexibility integration and bidirectional charging program. It is so important because it can unlock a huge potential for flexibility, and the relevant market actors are citizens owning an electric vehicle. There are about 250 million vehicles in the 27 countries of the EU. If 20% of them are electric, this might be the case in the near future. Yeah? And a battery charging, discharging power of 20 kilowatt can be flexibly used. This is possible because vehicles stand most of the time. Most of the times they are not used, but they stand somewhere. So if you assume this provides 1000 gigawatt of flexible power, and this is almost the total installed power capacity in the 27 countries of the EU. On this alone could provide all the short-time flexibility in the need in the EU. So you can have it, this power, you can have it for 1 hour, yeah, and you can have less power for a longer time. Yeah. Or take the German proposal for less detailed regulation, which I mentioned. So more explicit freedom for local innovative solutions. It's a meta measure, which can be summarized by saying legislation should more often explicitly confirm that something is allowed when it is not dangerous and it's a small activity. This is a little bit a paradigm shift because a law more likely details what is forbidden and not what is allowed. Yeah. An example for this is plug-in PV plants. Article 15A.9 of the Electricity Market Directive stipulates that member states may promote the introduction of plug-in mini solar systems up to 800 watt capacity in and on buildings. The German transposition of this stipulates that such systems are exempted from several obligations. Each citizen can simply plug in such a system without having to run through complicated procedures. So we extended this principle to other actions. For example, everything that has been working in a publicly funded project should be allowed to be operated continuously. It has been proven that it works, it does not represent a danger, so why not allowing it even if it does not yet comply with current norms and so on. Yeah? This concerns, for instance, the control of power output of a public electric vehicle charging station in Bad Hindling in such a way that network bottlenecks are avoided.
Yes, thank you, Michael. I think these examples show how much potential we actually have, especially if we start, for example, using electric cars as flexible energy storage. But for this to happen, rules need to change and support new ideas. And now move from ideas to the people who can actually use them, who are the main target audience of the master plan, both in terms of implementation and uptake.
Yeah, so the master plan addresses different governance levels from the local level to the transnational level. These governance levels can be addressed directly or indirectly. Where a direct contact to a governance level exists, ESINERGY partners can bring in the master plan directly to those who must decide about adopting one or another measure or the master plan as a whole. Alternatively, the master plan or parts of it can be brought into the public debate about the energy transition, for instance, by addressing relevant organizations in this field who then are in contact with different levels of governance.
Yeah, it's clear that different levels of government have different powers. Local actors can react quickly while national or EU changes take much longer. And this is important when thinking about how master plan could be used. So let's continue with the expected impact on policies. What kind of impact do you expect that this master plan to have on policy making at the local, national and transnational level?
I think elements of the master plan targeting the local or regional level can most likely be adopted. At national and transnational level, the processes are more complicated. Let's take the most complicated one, it's the EU level. A modification of a directive must be proposed by the European Commission. Even the European Parliament has no right to take the initiative. I myself on the reserve list for the European Parliament. If I move up, I will work to ensure that the proposals of the master plan addressing the EU level will become European law. But this requires an European Commission initiative, a majority in Parliament, and an approval by the European Council. And then European law is changed.
Yeah, unfortunately, you reminded us that the political change is a long process. So even when ideas make sense, it takes time, effort, and really strong evidence to turn them into law. Now let's look at how the master plan can spread beyond our project countries. How will the master plan support wider adoption of renewable energy practices and peak load management strategies beyond the ESINERGY countries?
Yeah, wide parts of the master plan are applicable to all European countries. We paid attention to the measures being transnational. Yeah. And then all ESINERGY partners are part of wider networks. Yeah. And by these networks, ideas developed in ESINERGY can be developed further, and work on adopting them, implementing them can continue.
Yeah, that was also the original idea, that master plan is can be promoted through the existing networks of the project partners. And it's also good to hear that the content of the master plan is useful far beyond the Danube region. And also it's good that partners have networks to share these ideas. So let's now talk about how to convince policymakers to use these ideas. This is also quite challenging. So what steps are being taken to encourage policymakers and authorities to adopt or internalize the master plan recommendations?
Bring a message to them by all channels.
Yeah. Your answer is simple, but true. If we want policymakers to act, we need to communicate these messages again and again through many channels as much as possible. So look now at the long-term impact of the project. Can you explain how the training activities and policy forums that have been part of our ESINERGY projects will contribute to the long-term legacy of the project?
Well, the twinning activities and the policy forums have created connections between people, ESINERGY project partners and others. These connections will not end with the end of the project.
Yeah, it's nice to hear that connections built in ESINERGY will continue after the project, and this was also our aim. And personal contacts are often the strongest result of this kind of collaboration. Also, one of the project results is to create cooperations beyond the project competition. So we will look for this, how successful we will be. Now let's look at the broader potential for the future. How do you see this master plan supporting future projects or policy frameworks beyond ESINERGY? What is its potential for broader application across Europe?
I think what we propose in the master plan and the action plan and the ideas that we have developed are good. They need maybe further developments, they need maybe some adaptation, so further reflection about it yet. But they have a potential, and they have a potential for broader application.
Yes, this shows that the master plan can inspire future projects, and that's good, and help shape new ideas across Europe. It's not a final, let's say, answer, but a starting point. So now finish with one final thought. Finally, if you had to summarize the added value of the master plan in just one sentence, what would it be, Michael?
Well, in a nutshell, the master plan is a library of measures out of which policymakers at different levels of government can pick out the most relevant ones in their area of responsibility for filling some of the gaps between the Renewable Energy Directive and the Electricity Market Directive on one side, and concrete implementation activities on the other side. It is a library of measures which can be modified and adapted, and which can serve as a source of inspiration for other measures which are not included in the master plan.
Thanks. A very clear and inspiring summary. Thank you, Michael, once again. That summary captures the essence of the master plan in a very simple and clear way, I would say. So thank you again. Thank you very much, Michael, for sharing your insights and explaining the master plan so clearly. Before we end, let's quickly take a look at the questions our audience has posted in the YouTube chat. Just a second. Well, I don't know if there are some. I guess not. I don't see any questions, fortunately. Okay. No question, Michael. I would just like to, at the end, thank you to everyone who participated and joined us today. A special thanks also goes to our technical support, Dragan, that you don't see him, for managing today's stream. Thank you once again, and we look forward to seeing you at the next ESINERGY interview. Have a great day and goodbye to everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you very much.